Hello and welcome to the Life Waves practice. My name is Sarah Bainbridge and I'm passionate about helping you achieve total well-being in our modern world, helping you to feel fabulous. So today what I'm going to talk about is unhealthy health foods. So what do I mean by that? Sounds a little bit odd, doesn't it? Well, there are certain health foods that have been promoted throughout the years as being really good for us. You know, these are the things that you should eat if you want to have a healthy diet. But in fact, it's not always that clear cut. And these things that we're encouraged to eat may or may not be that good for us. So in some cases, they can really put a strain on our systems. They can really create toxicity and other things that our bodies have to deal with, which isn't great. And certainly, I'm sure, not what you were intending when you started to eat those things. So let's just get clear on this. Again, as I always say, everything in moderation. So anything that we're going to talk about in the next few minutes, it's not that I'm saying don't eat them, they're terrible for you. There's a few things that I'll mention along the way. But in general, it's not that you have to cut them out completely. Everything in moderation. By being aware of the potential problems with some of these things, it may just allow you to moderate it. So actually, anything that we eat, even the most healthiest thing, if we have too much of it or have it in the wrong way, it can become unhealthy. So the classic example I always use with my clients with this one is water. So without water, we can't survive. If we don't have access to water, we die. In fact, you can survive a lot longer without food than you can without water. So it's absolutely essential to us. However, if you have too much water, it will kill you. So if you drink an awful lot of water in a very short space of time, you quite literally drown internally. Now, obviously, that's a totally extreme example. It's very, very rare that it happens. So for goodness sake, don't stop drinking water just because of that. But it's just to give you an example that something that we can't survive without can, in certain very extreme circumstances, actually kill us. So, you know, everything in moderation, everything in balance. So let's have a quick chat about some of these unhealthy health foods. There's three particular ones that I'm going to cover off today. There's lots of things that we can talk about, but we'll keep it down to just these three sort of key ones. So the first one that we're going to talk about, or we'll start on a sweet note, and we'll talk about sugar. So again, lots and lots and lots of publicity at the moment about the amounts of sugar in our diet and how bad sugar is for us. And it's absolutely right. There's an increasing amount of sugar. Sugar seems to pop up in the most unlikely things. So you'll pick up a savoury dish or something savoury, and if you look on the ingredients, it'll have sugar in it. And manufacturers and food producers and what have you are getting really, really clever about hiding that sugar. So they'll give it all sorts of peculiar names. You really have to be on your toes. So yes, sugar is bad for us. But actually, one of the approaches that's taken to this is to replace it with artificial sweeteners. Now, artificial sweeteners are far, far worse for us. You're actually better having a little bit of the sugar than you are a lot of the artificial sweeteners. So the artificial sweeteners are actually chemically based, they're chemicals in a lot of cases. So you can imagine this is putting a huge pressure on our systems to detox, to deal with that. As I've discussed in many previous live streams and articles and things, you'll know there's an awful lot of chemicals in our environment that we're having to deal with anyway without consuming them sort of almost deliberately. So artificial sweeteners aren't good for us, full stop. You don't want to be having those. So one of the alternatives that many people will look for are the natural sweeteners. And that's brilliant, yeah, that's much better than having the artificial sweeteners, but just something to bear in mind with those the natural sweeteners, Most of them are fruit-based, so they're fruit-based, hence being natural. Now, fruit-based sweeteners are actually fructose. So our cells, every part of us, can actually metabolize glucose, which is the pure sugar. And that's what it uses to create energy. So, you know, we need some of that. Fructose can only be metabolized by the liver. So if you're eating a lot of that natural sweeteners, a lot of fructose, you're putting quite a lot of pressure on your liver. And actually, if your liver, even if it's really healthy, that can put a lot of pressure on. If it's not so great, and actually for most of the population, the liver isn't as good as it should be. I can tell this by clients that I'm coming in, all walks of life, all different people. Very rarely does somebody come in with a liver that's 100% balanced. So if you're putting all that extra pressure on, in fact, the effect on the body is like drinking too much alcohol. It's a similar sort of effect, a similar sort of toxicity that enters into the body. Now, you would never dream, particularly, of drinking a lot of alcohol being healthy, but actually eating a lot of that fructose is having that same effect. So it's just being aware of the type of sugar that you're eating. By all means, absolutely avoid those artificial sweeteners, but don't replace it with a lot of fructose, because that's creating other problems. So things to look out for, if I just look at my notes here, because I know I always forget this, things to look out for is try and avoid if it says brown rice syrup, that sort of thing on it, because that's that fructosey type thing that isn't good for you. Try and replace it with something like raw local honey. Try and keep it local, because as we discussed in a previous live stream, local produce is much better, and honey is a really natural sweetener. Something like stevia is another one. And as I said before, actually, if you can't get access to that, just a little bit of normal proper sugar is better for you than all the artificial stuff, and potentially too much of the fructose. Right, so the next thing that we're going to talk about then is soya. Now, soya, again, is something else that is really promoted as being a healthy option, a healthy alternative to meat, a healthy thing to have. And it is, but it all depends on the type. So actually, fermented is better than unfermented. So the issue with unfermented soya is that it disrupts, it contains a chemical that disrupts the thyroid, or can disrupt the thyroid. And of course, your thyroid is one of your main glands. It controls digestion, metabolism, weight gain, all of those sorts of things. So you really don't want to be upsetting that. It also contains estrogens, which are connected with things like kidney stones, for instance, and it can stop absorption of a lot of minerals into our system. So this is the unfermented soya. So what you need to be aiming for is, by all means, eat it, but go for the fermented. So you've got things like the miso, the soup, the stuff, that's a really good one to have. Things like soya sauce is another one, a really good quality one though. So bear in mind what I always say to you: if you look at a label of something and there's stuff on there that you can't pronounce, chances are it's not that good for you, so put it back. Right, so the final area that we're just going to have a quick chat about in this section on unhealthy health foods is fish. So again, fish is really promoted as being a really healthy option, and it is, don't get me wrong. Certainly the oily fish, really good for us, and it contains a lot of the essential fatty acids that we don't actually get in the rest of our diet. So generally the population is quite deficient in those, and lots of cell building, cell repair, cell metabolism, really important. So fish is important. Now with fish, it all comes down to size, and the source of it is the important thing. So actually, small fish that come from a natural environment, so aren't farmed, are the best option, and I'll tell you why. So small rather than big. Even if they're coming from a natural environment, such as the sea, for instance, or a natural freshwater lake or river, because of the amount of pollutants that are occurring in our environment, and that's just a fact of life, they're there. As again we've discussed many times, we have a huge amount of chemicals in our environment. They've been building up years and years and years. They have to go somewhere, and they're in the water, they're in the soil, they're just in our environment in general. So because of that raising levels of pollution, the fish that are living in the water are actually picking that up in the same way that we do. The bigger the fish, the more pollutants they have in them. It just makes sense, doesn't it, when you think about them? The smaller ones have less capacity, there's less of them to build, to gather up that pollutants. So as we consume them as food, we'll be picking up less. Farmed versus unfarmed. Farmed fish are living in a very controlled, very artificial environment. There's the potential that, again, they're picking up a lot of parasites and bacteria and infections from each other. And even if you've got a very ethical, a very well-managed farming system, what they can often be using is chemicals and antibiotics and all sorts of things that really aren't that great in order to keep those fish healthy. In that sense, again, that's not good. As with all these things, there are the more organic, the better managed farming systems out there. But if possible, always try and eat fish that comes from that naturally sourced. So not things like wild salmon, fresh salmon rather than the farmed salmon if you can. So, as I say, I hope that's helped. I hope it's given you a little bit of food for thought, if you excuse the pun. As I said before, it's not a matter of completely cutting these things out. It's just being aware that sometimes those healthy foods, those things that we're encouraged to eat may not always be quite what they seem to be, and just to have that little bit of awareness about it. There's lots of information out there if you want to go and find out more. And as I say, do go and visit the website if you want to know a little bit more about this. And as I said at the beginning, if you go to the website, there's the option there to download my free ebook, which will tell you a little bit more about how our health works and all these things that we need to be taken into consideration with it. So, as I say, I hope that helped. I hope you're going to feel fabulous today and every day. And I look forward to speaking to you next week.